Thank you. So the last class we have seen something about compliance risk, and we have seen the what is compliance and then compliance risk and compliance functions and different responsibilities related to the compliance and everything. So now today we are going to continue the rest part of the compliance functions. So today's class actually I'm going to structure in a two way. The first one is first half I will discuss rest of the topics related to the compliance risk. Then I will discuss something about the complaints and risk management and related past papers. So we will have the two sessions in this class. The complaint risk today I think the last class we have discussed about the difference between the compliance function versus the internal audit function. And I have explained you all that internal audit functions come under the third line of defense, but compliance functions second line of defense, and everything we have discussed. I think, is there any questions you all wanted to ask from me? If you all have any questions, you all can send a message. Then through that I can just respond to your. I can respond to your questions. So related to the compliance function, Central Bank of Sri Lanka as a regulator, they have issued a circular in 1998 about the appointment of compliance officer. Since it's related to the compliance function and risk management functions and other things related to the financial institutional management, I like to say something about the central bank circular directions and guidelines. Generally, there are two type of directions or two type of circulars have been issued by the central bank. One is directions, other one is guidelines. What are the difference between the directions and guidelines issued by the central bank to the banks and finance companies? Generally, the directions are sort of directive, or the finance institutions or bank must follow, and it is based on that. It is issued based on certain act or the certain provisions of the act. It may be Banking Act, or it may be Motor Law Act, or it may be some other act. If the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, in accordance to any of the law or act, if they issued any circular or any conditions which has to be followed by the banks and finance institution, it is called as a directions. But other than the direction, they are issuing other type of circular, which is guideline. The guideline means it need not to be comply 100%, but it is better to comply. So the banks will be required by the banks and finance institution will be required by the central bank to comply with this. That is the best practices like that. So in this central bank issued the circular related to the appointment of compliance officer in 1998. That is also not the direction, it is sort of guidelines. So if it is the guideline, it is the best practices expected by the central bank from a bank or financial institutions. So according to that guideline, it says that banks should establish an independent compliance function to ensure compliance in respect of banking and other statutory requirements. So according to that guideline, every bank should establish an independent compliance functions. So there should be a separate compliance department or compliance officer. He should be an independent person, and that independent compliance function should look after the compliance risk of the banks and finance, particularly the banks. And the second thing is, they say that, and that particular circular says that the bank should have adequate policies and procedures to ensure compliance with laws and regulations. Because time to time, the central bank issued several regulations and directions. And so they say that the bank should have adequate policies and procedure to ensure that compliance with that particular regulations as well as laws, required laws. And the third one is saying that the bank should appoint a compliance officer. So these are the main requirement stipulated by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka with regard to the appointment of compliance officer or compliance function of a bank. And in that particular circular mention about the terms of reference of the compliance officer. It mentioned that development policies and procedure designed to eliminate or minimize the risk of breach of regulatory requirements. There should be a policies and procedure has to be developed. So it is the one of the terms of reference or one of the responsibility of the compliance officer. And the second one is so second one is they have to have they should promote throughout the business and believe that compliance is not a negative process but a positive contribution to the success of the bank. Because in the banks and finance institutions, there's a general opinion that compliance is a burden to the banks, because compliance function create additional cost to the bank, and they say that it is unnecessary. Some top management may have the view that it is unnecessary to the banking operation because it won't generate any revenue to the banks. Compliance function or risk management function will not create any revenue to the bank, but either it will create additional cost to the banks. So banks may have or bank officers, some of the bank officers or senior management or some officers may have negative view on the compliance function. So that's why the central bank circular says that promote throughout the business the belief that compliance is not a negative process, but it's a positive contribution to the success of the bank. Why it is, how it's contribute to the positively contribute. And generally, when a compliance function look after the compliance risk, they can avoid the financial losses as well as reputational losses that could be create a lot of damage or significant damage to the banks, particular banks or finance institutions. So that's what they are saying, that promote throughout the business the beliefness among the officers that compliance function is not a negative process but a positive contribution to the success of the bank. Then third one, the third terms of reference is that when introducing new business or financial instrument, conform to regulatory requirement and internal compliance and ethical standard. It is important actually. When a bank introduce new businesses or new financial instrument, for example, time to time, banks come up with different loan schemes, or banks come up with a different sort of deposit product. So when they are introducing different type of loans or different type of deposit product, what they have to do is they have to confirm with the compliance department whether it is comply with the regulatory requirement and internal compliance and ethical standard. Because sometimes bank may issue the product or bank may launch the product, but it may not be ethical. So they have to check whether it is comply with the ethical standard and internal compliance of the department and regulatory requirements. For example, bank may say that, okay, bank may launch a new product. So in that product, loan product, let's assume it's a loan product. So rather than rather than publishing the annual interest rate, bank may publish the monthly interest rate, but it is mislead the customers, because customers may think that this is an annual interest rate. Generally, the central bank and ethical standard may require that bank should publish annual interest rate in their advertisement. So when they launch the new product, they may come up with a monthly interest rate rather than mentioning the annual interest rate. That is not an ethical standard. So they have to check. So these type of things, they have to check with the complaints department whether these are the new product and their advertisement or the advertisement campaign are comply with the regulatory requirement and internal complaints. For example, I can say in another example, whenever they publish the interest rate for the deposit, they have to publish annual yield rate as well. So that is the one of the requirement by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. For example, even though they publish the interest rate for the 5 years deposits, they have to mention in the advertisement or in that published notice annual yield rate of that particular deposit. Then only the people can, because then depositors can can have a decision, better decision, whether based on the annual yield rate. So these type of thing they have to check with the complaints department. So these are the terms of reference. First terms of reference says that the bank has to create or the complaints officer should help to develop the policies and procedure designed to eliminate or minimize the risk of breaching regulatory requirement. And then he has the other terms of references promote throughout the business that complaints is not a negative function. It contribute to the success of the bank. Then other one is they have to introduce, they have to say that introduce a new product and all. They have to confirm that regulatory requirements and other internal complaints and ethical standards are followed in that particular new product. So these are the things related to the complaints officer. Actually, there are some other terms of references also issued by the central bank. The fourth one, of course, the maintain the regular contact with the good working relationship with regulators, because the complaints officer will be the contacting point to the regulators. So the complaints officer should have maintained the good regular contact and good working relationship with the regulators, and promote across the complaints network best practices developed in the area of complaints. So he has to create a create a good complaints network and best practices developed in the area of complaints. And the other one is, it says that understand and apply all new legal and regulatory development relevant to the business of the banks. So this is also one of the other requirement or TOR of the compliance officer. Actually, these are the things I need not to explain much. These are the just straightforward things you all can just read and understand. Anyhow, I'll just go through it rather than just discussing much. So the next one is saying that ensure that compliance policies and procedures are clearly communicated to the management and member of the staff. This is also one of the TOR of the compliance officer, because there are sometimes the banks and finance companies may have the policies and procedures, but these policies and procedures they may have in the document, but it may not have been communicated to the management or member of the staff members. So actually the compliance officer, chief compliance officer, has to ensure that the compliance policies and procedures are clearly communicated to the management and members of the staff. That is other one. Then it says that provide timely reports to management by highlighting regulatory development, changes in laws and other development. Actually, this is we have discussed even in the responsibility of the chief compliance officer. We have discussed last class. So provide timely report to the management by highlighting the regulatory development, changes in the laws and other development. Also, one of the requirement of the complaints officer. The other one is highlight serious or versus complaints problem where appropriate, work with management to ensure that they are rectified within the acceptable time. So that is also one of things. Actually, even though complaint function is an independent function, but they have to closely work with the management to rectify the issues identified through the complaints risk or through the complaints function. So they have to closely work with the management. And the last one is the represent the complaints function or relevant internal and external committees. So that is also one of the requirement of the chief compliance officer or compliance officer. So these are the basic terms of references we can see in the we can see if there is any questions related to the chief compliance officer and his terms of reference or his role and responsibilities, then you can mention some of these to the exam. Any questions you all wanted to ask from me? Anything? Is camera that's not working? Somebody mentioned that to turn on the camera. Can anybody respond that his camera doesn't work or not? I think it's working. I think now it's working, no? Yeah, somebody says that the camera is working. You will have any problem? Okay, I just presentation is missing. Oh. Is that presentation is missing? Can you all see the presentation? Now, okay. Okay. Then I just move to the next section. Actually, I wanted to cover this complaint section has the two sections again. One is related to the complaints functions, complaints officer responsibilities and all. Other one is related to the anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. So some concept, because in the banking and financial business, even in the risk management as well as compliance function, it is more relevant concept. And there are some questions in the exam papers also about the KYC, ML and CFT. What do you mean by KFC? KYC, sorry, KFC, it's KYC. What do you mean by KYC? Can anybody respond? KYC? No, you were? Come on. What is the meaning of KYC? Know your customer. Yeah, right. The KYC is a thing. So since you all are working in the banks and financial institutions, you all may know more than me. They know your customer. Yesterday I read an article in the newspaper. It is also mentioned the KYC, but is in the different meaning. What is the meaning of that KYC? They mentioned that know your candidate. Because since it's an election period, everybody is sort of talking about the elections and candidates and all. So in the newspaper they are written an article. They written an article saying that know your candidate. That's also KYC. But we don't worry about that KYC. Here we are going to discuss about the know your customers. It is an important concept in the banking business nowadays, because there are money laundering activities and terrorist financing take place through the banking business. So the bank staffs and as well as bank operations should be well aware about their customers. Who are their customers? So it says that then KYC enables the bank to know or understand their customers and their financial dealing to be able to serve them better and prudently manage the risk of money laundering and financing of terrorism. Because in order to avoid the money laundering situation as well as financing of terrorism situation instances, banks should know about their customers and their transaction. For that only the KYC concept is introduced. And actually when you are opening the bank accounts or any other deposit related accounts related to transaction, then the banks give sort of form to know about to ask about or to get the detail about our our informations, our names and address, as well as our income, monthly income and monthly expected transactions and all. So this is because the whole idea behind that filling the form is to get the idea of the customer. So they will have that number database. For example, if the customer says that, oh, generally the customer transaction is 10,000, so no 50,000, we'll say that let's assume his monthly salary is 50,000, that 50,000 monthly salary is deposited in the banks every month. But suddenly that particular customer deposit more than 5 million in his account. So that time the bank has to get alert. Okay, this customer has always having the deposit of 50,000 every month and withdrawing that money within the during the month period, but suddenly the particular customer deposit 5 million. That in that instances, bank may ask that, okay, why what is the source of this fund? So in that case, in order to identify that, is there any chances of money laundering or financing of terrorism, or to identify that. So that purposes this KYC policy is must important. And this is anti-money laundering. Anti-money laundering, before knowing about the anti-money laundering, first we have to have the idea about the money laundering. What is money laundering? The money laundering is the changing the illegal money to the banking system, or putting the illegal money into the legal system is called as a money laundering system. So actually the anti-money laundering system refers to set of laws, regulations and procedures intended to prevent criminals from illegally obtained funds as legitimate income. To prevent legally obtained funds as a legitimate income. Though anti-money laundering laws covers the relatively limited range of transaction and criminal behavior, their implications are far-reaching. So in the bank business, first they have to know their customers, and then they have to have the vigilant about the anti-money laundering, about the money laundering activities. if any illegal, if the customer, if they have the suspect that the customer is trying to transfer the illegally obtained funds into the legitimate income, then they have to have the vigilant and they have to inform to the central bank, the financial intelligence unit of the central bank. And the third one is combating the terrorism of financing. That is also related to the sort of relations to the money laundering activities, which involves investigating, analyzing, deterring and preventing source of funding for activities intended to achieve political, religious or ideological goals through violence and threat of the violence against the civilians. So these type of concept, sometimes in the short notes you may get the something about the know your customer, or anti-money laundering. So in that time, you may have to write the answer that what is know your customer and what is anti-money laundering. Any doubt or any questions you all wanted to ask from me? Actually, now the know your customer transaction, there's a question from a student, KYT. So what he asked that what is the meaning of KYT? Nowadays, the earlier concept KYC is also the KYT is related to the concept of KYC. The KYC is the know your customer. Now there's a new concept called KYT, know your transaction. Even at the transaction, earlier the concept was the bankers or bank staff should have idea about their customer or know about the customers. That's why they create the concept called KYC, know your customer. Now in the advanced level, they are saying that know your transactions. It means whenever the customer make an each and every transaction, bank or its staff should be vigilant about particular transaction. So it means they tighten the KYC policy. So not only the customer wise, even at each and every transaction wise, they have to vigilant about the each and every transaction. It is called KYT, know your transactions. So that is the meaning of KYT. Understand? Okay. Now we can move to the yeah. This is the KYC. Know your customer. Know your customer or KYC, customer due diligence, is an ongoing process for prudent banking practices. Therefore, the banks are encouraged to do the following things: put in place a system to monitor the accounts and transaction on regular basis. So under the KYC policy, these banks and banks should have the system to monitor the account and transaction on regular basis. That's what I gave an example that on regular basis, a customer always deposit 50,000 in a month, and particular month or recently he started to deposit 5 million per month or more than that, and then after some days he withdraw that money. Then then they have to be, or bank has to be vigilant about it. Recently I read a news item in the paper. It is also in the Colombo suburb area. One of the poor man, he deposited 1,400 million or 140 million in a deposit suddenly. Then bank had an doubt, and then they inquired about it, and they found it is some illegal money, drugs dealing money deposited in the particular poor person's account in some Columbus suburb area. So like that, then actually in that sense, in that circumstance only, bank should know that okay, this is his income is 25,000 per month, and he can deposit maximum 25,000 per month, or at least 250,000 or 1 million, up to 1 million. But suddenly, if the customers in the customer's account, there's a 140 million appears in the customer's account, then bank should have the vigilant. Bank should have to inquire about how this money came to that account and what is the source of fund. Then if they have the doubt, they have to inform to the FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank. So that's why first one is say that the put in place a system to monitor the accounts and transaction on regular basis. That is the first one. The second one is update customer information at reasonable intervals, because this is what always happening in the banks and financial institutions. Because normally what banks is doing is, when we are opening the accounts 10 years before, they may give some forms to fill us. At the time, my address may be something else, and my income level may be something different, and we gave the information. They upload that information to the system, and they won't update that information. So after some time, that information, customer information, may be outdated. So they can't do anything with that information. So that's why it says that update customer information at reasonable intervals. At least 2-3 years, once in a year or once in 2-3 years, they have to update the information about the customer. Then only they can monitor the customer. Then third one is maintain proper records of the customer identification. Because customer identification also one of the important things in the under the KYC. So actually that's a purpose when we go to the bank and ask to or request to open account, they ask some identification proof. We may have to give you, we can give either identity card or driving license or passport or any identification book, because custom identification is some important thing. You may recently heard about that during the corona period, the central bank relaxed some this KYC policy, and ask the bank or request the banks to allow the customers to open the accounts online without KYC. So then we realized that customers have started to misuse the accounts, because without KYC, people are opening the accounts and they transfer the money to the particular accounts, and we started to withdraw, transfer that this customer unidentification accounts money to some other accounts, and this is it may be money laundering activities. So actually, customers maintain the proper customer identification is an important thing. Otherwise, they may use that without identification. They may open the accounts in a fake name, and they can give the fake information. Then they can use that accounts to money laundering, do the money laundering, and after that they can close down or give up the accounts. So then bank or regulators may not able to trace that accounts or the person or activities. So that's why it's asking that maintain the proper record of customer identification. Other one is monitor and check unusually large transactions. This is I have already explained to you all. With regard to the customer, the bank should know that the average transaction size. It may be different to the customer to customer. So some customers average transaction may be 50,000 monthly. Some customers average transaction may be 250,000, or some customers may be 1 million, or some customers average transaction may be 5 million. But if there is their average transaction, and if there is any unusual large transaction, as I explained to you all, the average transaction is 50,000, but unusual transaction, there's a 5 million deposited in the accounts, or 50 million deposited in the accounts within a 10 days period. Then there's an unusual transaction. They should have the system to monitor and check the unusual transactions. And finally, providing training to staff on KYC. Under the KYC policy, time to time, the bank has the responsibility to provide the training to the staff on the know your customer policy, and how to identify the suspected transaction, how to deal with the know your customer consent. So these are the things the bank has to carry out, or bank has to perform with regard to the know your customer policy. Any doubt? Yeah. Then we can discuss about the money laundering. In the money laundering, of course, this is sort of money laundering is a process of making large amount of money generated by the criminal activities such as drugs traffic, and terrorist funding appears to have come from the legitimate source. The money from the criminal activity is considered dirty and process launders it to make it look clean. Money laundering is itself a crime. So money laundering is considered as a crime, criminal activity. Normally, this is in the simple way you can understand that some drug dealers or terrorists, they may get some illegal money. Okay, so when they get the illegal money, they can't use those money into the for their activities. So what they will do is, and there is no worth of keeping that illegal money. Illegal money is not a black money. It's not a sort of a counterfeit money. It's a real money or genuine money. Genuine money in the sense it's a real bank note, but it they obtain in illegal way. So they obtain in the illegal way. So they can't just deposit in the bank. When they deposit in a bank, what will happen is bank will ask what is the source of fund and how you are going to use it. Those kind of questions will be asked from the bank with regard to the customer deposits, if it is a large amount of deposits. So what will do is this these people will money launderers, what they will do is they will do, if you look into this graph, you can see that they collect the dirty money, so illegal money, through the terrorist financing or drug trafficking. Then through that, what they will do is they will deposit in the bank account in a different form. For example, they may open 100 of accounts, and if it is 100 million, what they will do is they will deposit 1 million accounts. So it may not be captured by the bank, because banks may think, okay, this is just 1 million transactions. Banks may not get vigilant about it. So what they will do is they will take the 100 million this illegal money, and rather than deposit in a bank, enter 100 million into one account, what they will do is they will transfer that illegal money, they will deposit that illegal money into the 100 accounts, 100 different accounts. And what they will do is after that, they will do the wire, through the wire transfer, they will make into the banking system into one account. Then through that, what they will do is they will purchase the some precious goods or luxury items or real estate. They will invest in the real estate or vehicles. Then after that, they will easily sell that money, sell that property and get that money. Then they will go and deposit. And when the bank asks that, they may say that this is I got this money by selling my property, my selling my house, selling my house or selling my vehicle. So this is the way they the typical money laundering schemes is or system is working. So they are, what they are doing is they are getting the dirty money first, and the dirty money they somehow they deposit in the banking accounts, this small amounts, the small amounts or some forgery accounts. So during they are using a different way to deposit that money. That's what we are saying, that banks should have the vigilant about their customers, know your customers. Then they will identify, okay, this is the account, it is in a dormant section, or it is in unknown, there is rarely there is a deposit, but suddenly there's a 1 million deposit. Likewise, there are in our branch, there are several these unoperative accounts are getting deposits, and then particular day they are transferred to the other banks through the online. So the bank should have the vigilant about the transaction. So this is the way. So they deposit in a different technique, using different techniques, they deposit in a bank. And then through the online transaction or some other way, what they will do is they will just transfer that money into some other country or some other territory or some other region, and they pool that entire money into one account. And after pooling that into one account, what they will do is they will buy a luxury goods or valuable goods. It may be real estate, it may be vehicle, it may be jewels or any luxury goods. And now they make it as a clean. So then after some time, they may sell that particular luxury goods and deposit the money into the banking system. So what they did, they first take the dirty money, and through some process, they clean it, they launder it and make it as a clean money. So this is the typical money laundering system. Any questions you all wanted to ask from this? Any questions related to the money laundering? Any questions? Okay, then I'll move into the then I'll move to the next one. Something about the Financial Intelligence Unit of Sri Lanka, financial FIU, we call as a FIU. This FIU is currently attached with the central bank, which is responsible to anti-money laundering and combating terrorist financing of terrorism. And actually, this institution or this division of the central bank hardly working to identify the suspect transaction or any activities related to the criminal, and they are reporting to the relevant judicials or the relevant criminal CID or any other relevant people about this suspicious transaction. Then they will do the particular investigations and find the criminals or catch the criminals. So actually, if in the central bank, if you can just go through the FIU and FIU division in the central bank website, you can find the FIU. Or otherwise, even FIU.lk website, there's a website, and then if you just go to that website, you can get there what are the activities they are carrying out, and you can get an idea. And even they are publishing an annual report. In the annual report, all the information you all can get it. So actually, there are 3 acts relevant to the or related to this know your customer, anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. In Sri Lanka, the first act was created in 2005. It is number 25 of 2005, Convention on the Suppression of Terrorist Financing Act number 25 of 2005. The other act is Prevention of Money Laundering Act number 5 of 2006. And third one is the Financial Transaction Reporting Act number 6 of 2006. This is the Financial Intelligence Unit of Sri Lanka, was established in March 2006 as an autonomous body under the Ministry of Finance and Planning. The FIU was reorganized in February 2007 as an independent institution within the central bank's framework and administrative structure. Actually, even though it is an independent autonomous body created in 2006, then in 2007 February, it was as an independent institution, it was attached to the central banks, or it was brought to the central bank framework, administrative and administrative structure. So currently, it is function as a department of the central bank. and they are the people in charge for all these the AML and CFT related activities. And objective of the FIU is, the main objective of the FIU in Sri Lanka is to combat the money laundering, terrorist financing and other related crime in Sri Lanka in line with the international recommendation and standards. So this institution is actually involving to combat the money laundering and terrorist financing related to the Sri Lanka in Sri Lanka. And actually, what are the norms or what are the things they have to follow it? There are some international recommendation and standards. Actually, 1 year before, you all may heard about that Sri Lanka was earlier. Sri Lanka was listed under the grey list because we failed to comply with certain international standards with regard to the money laundering and terrorist financing. So the international body, what they did is they classified Sri Lanka as one of the grey list country that create lot of financial losses to the Sri Lanka and companies or business entities operating in Sri Lanka. Then actually after that, central bank and the FIU hardly worked, and they just worked, and they tried, then they complied with all the requirement stipulated by the international body. And then finally the last October or November, I think November, Sri Lanka was delisted from the grey list, and they are eliminated from the grey list, and now Sri Lanka is no more in the grey list. So actually the FIU contributed a lot to do that function. So why I'm saying this is because the FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank, which is responsible for the activities related to the money laundering and terrorist financing, anti-money laundering and combating terrorist financing in Sri Lanka. In achieving the above objective, FIU has set up the following following objective. One is strengthening the AML and CFT activities in Sri Lanka. And second one is upgrading the existing AML CFT regime in Sri Lanka. And third one is upgrading compliance status of Sri Lanka to internationally accepted level, and strengthen the cooperation with international organization and implementation of international best practices on AML and CFT. These are the objective of the FIU. Actually, if there's any questions or short notes, because in your exam papers there's a one question, there may be, or most instances there is a questions related to the short notes. In the short notes there may be headings, the small headings, so they may ask to write about the FIU. So you have to say that FIU, the main objective of the FIU, and the other sub objective of the FIU. So this is the related to the FIU functions. Any questions you all wanted to ask from me related to the FIU function? Okay. Then I'll move into the other section. The other slides. Next slide. It is about the first act, number 25 of 2005, Convention on Suppression of Terrorist Financing Act. This act was enacted on 8 August 2005 in order to give effect to Sri Lanka's obligation as a statutory to the International Convention on the suppression of terrorist financing adopted by the UN on January 10, 2000. The act prohibits the financing of terrorism act, terrorist and terrorist organization. Further, this act has provisions for freezing the terrorist financing related assets and forfeiture of such assets. This act has been further strengthened through the amendment brought into the Act in 2011 and 2013. Actually, this is nothing to explain. Just read and understand it. So this Act was enacted first in 2005, and then under that it is under this Act it is prohibit the terrorist financing in Sri Lanka, and it gives some powers to the regulators, as well as this Act was amended in 2011 and 2013. That is the message from this slide. Then other Act is number 5 of 2006, Prevention of Money Laundering Act. This Act, which prohibit the money laundering, was enacted. This Act was enacted in 6 March 2006. It also set out the necessary measures to combat the money laundering, such as freezing, property tracking, and forfeiture assets related to money laundering. This Act was further amended in 2011. So these are simple things you will just have a read and understand it. And the next one is number 6 of 2006, Financial Transaction Reporting Act. This Act was enacted in 6 March 2006. And this Act only provide for setting up a FIU as a national agency to collect data and information related to suspicious financial transaction to facilitate the prevention and detection, investigation and prosecution of the offense of money laundering and financing terrorism. So this is just another Act, the third Act, which is related to the this financing, the AML and CFT. Then actually this financing terrorism, Financial Transaction Reporting Act is an sort of important act, or it's an sort of comparably important act, or more involvement in the banks and financial business. Under this act, every institution should appoint a compliance officer who shall be responsible for ensuring institutions compliant with this particular Financial Transaction Act. Actually, this is where we are connecting this compliance function with the KYC and AML function, because you all may suddenly wonder that why we have studied the compliance function, why we have moved to the KYC as well as AML CFT. Actually, this is the point. According to the Financial Transaction Act, Financial Transaction and Reporting Act, every institution should appoint a compliance officer who shall be responsible for ensuring institutions' compliance with the requirements of this particular act. And it says that it has to have banks and financial institutions should establish and maintaining the procedures and system to implement the customer identification requirement. That's why we have studied about the KYC. So the banks and financial institutions, they must implement the customer system to identify the customer identification requirement. Other one is implement procedures for record keeping and retention requirement. Other one is implement the process of monitoring, implement the reporting requirement, and make its officers and employees aware of laws related to the money laundering and financing of terrorism. So actually, this is the act where even the some more than 500,000 worth of transactions are. You all mean that if you are working in the banks and finance institution, finance companies, you all may aware that when a customer deposit with the banks more than 500,000, then that name and that particular transaction detail has to be reported to the central bank, FIU of the central bank. Actually, those reportings take place through this particular act. So This act only required that this transaction has to be reported to the FIU. And not only the 500,000 level, if there is any suspicious transaction, that may be the small amount, but if there is a suspicious, or bank officer has a suspicious, they can inform to the particular bank, can inform those suspicious transaction detail to the FIU of the central bank, and then the FIU will have the proper investigation on this suspicious transaction. And as per the section 6 of the Suspicious Financial Transaction and Reporting Act, banks and financial institution is required to report the cash transaction and electronic fund transfers exceeding threshold of 1 million. Sorry, I just mentioned the 500,000. It's not 500,000. Earlier level is 500,000. Now, if it is 1 million or more, they have to 1 million and more or its equivalent foreign currencies, they have to report it to the central bank. And in terms of Financial Transaction and Reporting Act, persons engaging in or carrying the business or designated non-finance business are required to comply with the provision of this act. Actually, now this finance transaction or AML and CFT, the anti-money laundering and combating of terrorist financing requirements are normally followed by the banks and finance institution. Now that requirements are extended to the non-finance business as well. For example, this real estate company has to follow this particular this act, and gem and jewelry business people has to follow this particular act, and likewise there are some non-finance businesses people also has to follow this this FTR, Financial Transaction Reporting Act. Under this act, they have the obligation to report the suspicious transaction or large volume of transaction details to the FIU of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. This is all about this compliance function of the banks and financial institution. Any questions? I think this is there's a question that what is freezing in terms of money laundering. Actually, in terms of money laundering, if there is any if there is any suspicious, the money laundering suspicious, and then that particular bank should inform to the FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank, about this suspicious transaction, and they will carry out whether the particular account involved with the money laundering activities, and then if they relied, and they will freeze that account. First they will actually, if they had the doubt and if it is confirmed, they will freeze the accounts, and after that they will hand it over these activities, this proper investigation to the criminal investigation unit, and they will carry out this in the litigations and all. So first instance, if they confirm it, there's a suspicious that particular account get involved with the money laundering activities. First they will freeze. They will freeze in the sense they will just seize the account. Seize the account in the sense they can't do the withdrawals or deposit into the customer can't do the withdrawals or deposit to the particular account. They freeze the accounts. Then after that they will started the further investigation, or they will hand it over the further investigation to the criminal investigations divisions and litigation process. So freeze in the sense they will put the sort of restriction not to have the further transaction, deposit or withdrawal from the particular accounts. I think you all may understand it. Okay, then this is all about the complaint function related to the banks and finance companies. If you all have any questions, I am ready to entertain that questions or answer that questions. Otherwise, as I said, this class have the two sections. The first one is about the complaints function. Rest of the sections related to the complaints function. And the second one is about the some past paper questions related to the risk management and complaints function. Do you have any questions? Then otherwise we can move to the past paper questions. Okay. Since there is no questions in the inbox, I'll just move to the past papers. In the past papers, I think whether I don't know whether you will have the past papers right now. But what I can do is I can just read the questions and ask the answer, or then I can just explain how to answer those questions. If you will see the structure of the paper, there are 20 questions in the question 1 or part 1. In the part 1, there are 20 questions. Each question have 2 marks, and accordingly 20 marks you can earn from the part 1 or questions 1. And then there are other 7 questions. Generally it is 7 questions, and out of 7 questions you will have to answer 4 questions. Then each questions have 20 marks. So basically you can, that 4 questions have the 80 marks, and the first question has the 20 marks, the 100 marks, of course. What I can say is I'm covering risk management, compliance function, as well as money laundering. Sorry, risk management, compliance function, as well as corporate governance. If you all study these 3 areas, you can earn easily 60 to 65 marks, because there are some 20 marks questions in each sections. And so in the risk management, there will be a 20 marks questions, and for the compliance function also there will be a 20 marks questions, and for the corporate governance also there will be a 20 marks questions. And in the first question, of course, the part 1, there are so 1 or 2 questions related to this risk management and compliance function. So you can earn nearly 60 to 65 marks from the from these question paper. Here I'm just asking, I'm going to go through the questions in the past paper question 2019 September. This is the latest available paper. 2019 September. If you all have the papers, you all can just keep it in your hand. 2019 September paper. The part 1 question 9, there's a 2 marks questions. It says that state the law that restrict the deposit taking by unauthorized institution in Sri Lanka. What is the law restricted deposit taking by unauthorized institution in Sri Lanka? What is the act? Any answers? Number 42 of 2011 Business Finance Act, which prohibit the deposit taking by unauthorized institutions. And okay, I'll just move into that. Okay, there's a questions here. It came to in the as a short notes. They ask about the difference between the liquidity and solvency. They asked to answer what is liquidity and what is solvency. Your short notes about the liquidity and solvency. What would be the answer? You can actually unmute your microphones and you can answer if you know the answer. Or the main difference between the liquidity and solvency. What is the difference between the liquidity and solvency? We have studied at the risk management section, the initial class, the difference between the liquidity and solvency. What is the difference between the liquidity and solvency? Both are related to the liquidity risk of the bank, but yes, one person correctly answered liquidity is a short-term concept where the bank has enough liquidity to meet its all obligation is called liquidity risk. But solvency risk or solvency is where the bank has net present value of the bank is greater than the net present value of the liabilities. Oh, I am repeating that. Whether the net present assets of the bank is greater than the net present value of the liabilities, then that is called as a solvency, which is a long-term concept. Solvency is a long-term concept and liquidity is a short-term concept. I can just read the answers this answer paper answer or prescribed answer. Liquidity refers to the ability of a firm to mobilize assets and use them to service debt, fund current operation and react quickly to change in business condition. This is a short-term concept. The answer for solvency is solvency, though related to the liquidity, refer to the bank's overall credit picture and its ability to fulfill long-term obligations and secure funding in future. It is related to the overall capital picture of the bank, its degree of financial leverage and risk associated with the structure. So solvency is sort of long-term concept which has the ability of the banks or finance institution to meet its all liabilities. This is the question number 6 in the 2019 September paper, which is directly related to the risk management section of what we have studied. It says that deposit-taking financial institutions are responsible for sound liquidity risk management. Do you agree? Briefly explain your answer. What is the answer? Do you agree with first? Can you just answer that? Do you all agree with that or not? I'm repeating the question. Deposit-taking financial institutions are responsible for sound liquidity risk management. Do you agree with that? Briefly answer your questions. Whether the banks and financial institution, the deposit-taking financial institution means the institution which are accepting deposits. In Sri Lanka, there are two type of deposits are two type of institutions are mainly accepting deposits. What are those institutions? Banks and licensed finance companies. Not only the banks and licensed finance companies, some other institutions also accepting it. These rural cooperative banks and some cooperative societies, thrift societies also accepting the deposit. but mainly the deposit accepting institutions are licensed banks and licensed finance companies regulated by the central bank. So it says that those are the institutions called as a deposit taking financial institutions, because they are the people accepting the deposits. So the question is, deposit taking finance institutions are responsible for sound liquidity management. Do you agree? Briefly explain your answer. There's an answer actually given by a student. It says that agree. Yes, that is the correct answer. We have to agree that we have to say that agree. Then answer is actually in the banking business, by its nature, they are accepting short-term liquidity and giving long-term loans and advances. So they are by the nature of the business. If you see the banking business, they are accepting the deposit normally for below 1 year deposit, maximum 1 year deposit they are accepting. 3 months deposit, 6 month deposits, or 1 year deposits. Mostly the 1 year deposit they are accepting. But when they are granting the loans and advances, they are granting the loans and advances for 3 years loans and advances, or 3 years loans, or 5 years loan, or sometime 10 years housing loans or something. So long term loans. They are giving long term loans by accepting the short term deposit. In that scenario, the banking business in nature, it faced to the liquidity risk. What sort of liquidity risk? Maturity mismatches, because they are accepting short-term deposit and granting long-term loans and advances. So there's a maturity mismatch between the assets and liability. Through these maturity mismatches, the banks are vulnerable to liquidity risk. So the bank has to manage the liquidity risk. So that's what it says, that in the answer, I am just reading the answer to you all. The main funding source of the deposit taking financial institution is the deposit accepted by the public. And deposit taking financial institution involved in the financial intermediaries using fund received from the deposit. Actually, what is the financial intermediation? They are financial intermediation in the sense accepting deposits and granting loans and advances. Deposits are short term and loans and advances fund are long term one. Hence, a maturity mismatch between the assets and liabilities are generated. So in this maturity mismatches create the liquidity risk to the banks and deposit taking finance institutions. So they had to manage that liquidity risk. They to manage that risk or to mitigate that risk, they must have sound liquidity risk management. So if you write this answer, you will get the 5 marks. I'll agree. Any doubt? Actually, this is not like the class. When we are doing the uh, papers, I expect more interactions between the students and myself. So you'll have to answer. You will have to answer. Then only I can get the feedback that you will understand my previous classes. So whichever I teach you all, and you are answering. So that will give the more feedback to me. So I just expect more answers. You'll need not to answer the very lengthy answer. You'll need not to give a very lengthy answers. Just you can give very short answers. Then I can feel it that you will understand my teachings. And also the second question is, ALCO, Asset and Liability Committee, plays an eminent role in managing liquidity risk and market risk exposure to deposit-taking financial institution. Briefly discuss. What is the meaning of Asset and Liability Committee? The Asset and Liability Committee also we have discussed in the risk management section. which is responsible to manage the liquidity risk as well as market risk of the banks. So they are the people. I have listed out you all that what is the role and functions of the ALCO, the Asset and Liability Committee. So what are the roles and functions of the Asset and Liability Committee? They are the people deciding the deposit rates. They are the people deciding the these lending rates, the pricing to the assets and liability of the banks, and they are the people finding the how to manage the excess funds or shortage of funds of the banks and how to funding it. They are the people deciding it. The answer giving in here. ALCO, the Asset and Liability Committee, is a decision-making authority responsible for balance sheet planning for a risk-return perspective and also responsible for strategic management of the interest rate risk and liquidity risk. So, if you all wanted to write it down, I can just slowly say that you all wanted to write it the answers, or you all can get it, I think. You can get this in the in my notes as well. So it is mentioned that the functions of the ALCO, the first it's mentioned that to ensure the efficient implementation of balance sheet management policies, to receive and review the reports on liquidity and market risk management, and to identify the balance sheet management issues that is leading to underperformance, and to review the deposit and loan product pricing strategy, to determine the correct assets and liability mix to maximize the profit, and then they say that giving the direction to manage the interest rate and forex risk. So these are the responsibility of the ALCO or Asset and Liability Committee, which is responsible for the balance sheet management. I will understand it. Okay. Then I will move to the third questions. Why do you believe that public confidence in the deposit-taking financial institution is important? Briefly explain. Okay. Just give a short answer to me. Why do you believe that public confidence in a deposit-taking financial institution is important? Briefly explain. Why public confidence is important for a bank and finance company compared to, for example, compared to the other companies, for example, compared to the JKH. The commercial bank should have more public confidence.
To attract more depositors.
If you ask this question in other way, we can just say compared to JKH or compared to Kaylee's group. A commercial bank or HNB must have more public confidence. Why? Why? The answer is they get there was an answer. They get their primary fund from the public deposit. Yeah, that is the issue. Actually, the other businesses, they are running with their own capitals. But for the bank and financial institution, bank and finance companies or deposit-taking finance institution, main source of fund is deposits. So when there's a confident only, depositors will come and deposit with the banks and finance companies. If they lose the confidence, they will not come and deposit with the banks and finance companies. Because the nature of the business is different here. For example, if I buy a product, or for example, if I buy a television from a showroom, Aban showroom or Singer showroom, I will not much worry about their stability, because I'll just pay the money and I'll get the television. Of course, I will worry about that. If there is any issues, if there is any repairs, they have to give the service within 1 year period, warranty period. Other than that, I will not much worried about fund, because when I am paying, I get back the goods. For example, in other way, if I say that if I am going to the uh, if I going to the restaurant and having the dinner, I will not worry about their stability, because okay, I am paying money and they are giving good food and I am having it and enjoying it and coming back. I don't worry about whether they will continue this restaurant for 6 months or 1 year or 5 years. I don't worry about it. I will not worry. But the banking business is different, because I am depositing the money and I have to wait till the maturity date. It may be 6 months or 1 year or sometimes 5 years. Then to get back the money. So I am giving the money and I will get back in 1 year time or 5 years time. And for that period, I will worry, in that circumstances, I will worry about the stability of the institutions. Because that institution has to continue for 5 years or 1 year to give back my money. But in other institutions, not like that. So that's what it says, that for the public confidence is important. Why the public confidence is important? Their primary funding source is deposits, and therefore they have to get the primary funding source. They have to keep the public confidence. That is the first one. And to attract the deposit, financial institutions need to develop confidence in public on such institutions. Otherwise, people won't come. The third one is, if they fail to do so, it may result to losing public confidence, which would in turn result in a difficulty in mobilizing deposit to conduct business activities. Reputation on finance institution plays a significant role in developing public confidence. So reputation, managing reputation risk is most important to create the public confidence. So if then they say that if it is destroying, they can't get the money. So the basic idea is, compared to other institutions, you all must have more, the banks and financial institution must have more confidence, must create public confidence, and that will give that will enable the banks and finance companies to get the deposits. So that may be the answer. And the fourth question is about the Lehman Brothers. Actually, it is about what is the main factor contributor to Lehman Brothers to fail. Actually, this is other sections. Some failure of banks and finance institutions, which we will. I think I will not cover this area. That will covered by other lecturer. So at that time you can you may once you attend that class, you may answer these questions. So this is about the risk management function of the institution. That's all about the okay. There's another two questions related to in the short notes, which is related to the risk management functions. The first question is, they ask about the conflict of interest. What is conflict of interest? What do you mean by conflict of interest? It's a short notes. They gave, or they ask about the conflict of interest. What is conflict of interest? The conflict of interest is simply, we can define, you can just keep it in mind. Because whatever areas when you are studying, you will have to keep that in the simple concept and keep that in the mind. Then you can develop the answer in the example. You need not to keep everything in the theoretical form. You have to make it in a simple way and keep it in the mind. So conflict of interest, you can keep it in mind if a private interest of a person is contradict with his official interest, that is called conflict of interest. If a private interest of a person is contradict with the official interest of that person, is called conflict of interest. The conflict of interest can be defined in a two way. This is one conflict of interest. Other way is the responsibility of the one job is different from the or contradict with the responsibility of other job, is also called as a so so in that question it's asking that sorry for the interruptions. Actually the conflict of interest can be defined into two ways. The first way is a personal interest of a person is contradict with the official interest of the person, is called as a conflict of interest. The second one is a person's the interest or responsibility of the one designation or one job is contradict with the designation of other job, is called as a contradiction of interest. For example, I have explained to you all in a scenario we can explain. Okay, if a compliance officer, in the previous class I have explained the conflict of interest. If a compliance officer is an officer in charge to credit as well, okay, compliance officer and DGM credit also the same person, in that case the responsibility as a compliance officer is contradict with the responsibility as a DGM credit. So in that case the responsibility of one position is contradict with the responsibility of other person also, can the position also called as a conflict of interest. This is the second way of conflict of interest. So in an institution there may be conflict of interest and those interests has to be avoided. And the answer is the conflict of interest occurs when there is a conflict between the private interest and official responsibility of a person in the position of trust and challenges arises to fulfilling one duty impartial. In order to, in other terms, conflict of interest is a situation in which individual has competing interests and loyalties. That may be the short answer for the conflict of interest. Do you all understand that? I think I don't know whether the way of discussing the paper class in the Zoom or this Google class is appropriate, but I understand that if you all don't have understanding, or if you all have any doubt, you all can answer from me. You all can questions, or you all can ask from me any further clarification. So if you all don't understand that, you all can just drop the message that please explain this particular section, then I will repeatedly explain that. That's not an issue. Okay, then there's other question. This is internal controls. Internal control also we have studied at the risk management section, and that is about the internal control is also related to the first line of defense in the risk management functions, and which involve the banks and financial institution must have more internal control system compared to the other institutions. And when the first line of defense doing the risk management system, they have to ensure that all the internal control systems are in place with respect to particular day-to-day operations. So that is about the internal control systems. And the senior management has the ultimate responsibility that the internal control systems are in place in the institutions. And third line of defense are the internal auditors. They are giving the assurance to the management. The internal control systems are in place in the day-to-day operations of the banks and finance institutions. So actually, the answer is given here. Internal control is a process deploying those charged with the governance, senior management, and the other personnel, and designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of objectives in the reliability of financial reporting. An effective internal control system reduce the risk of assets loss, fraud, and help ensure that information is completely accurate. So internal control system are basically involved with the operational risk of the in the risk management system. So this is all about the risk management questions in the 2009 papers. Any questions you will want to ask from me? Actually, in the 2009. Yeah, unfortunately, in the 2009 September paper, there is no any questions related to the compliance functions. Let's we move to the 2009 March and see some questions related to the compliance functions. Okay. Not only compliance function, actually in the risk management also we can discuss because the time. Okay. The first questions, as I say that in the first questions, there are 2 marks questions, 10 2 marks questions. It's in the first 5 questions are given in the multiple choice. So it's case that a bank is a liquid as long as has enough capital. The answer A is has enough capital to pay off depositors. The answer B has mostly good loans. The answer C does not experience a run on deposit its in deposits. The answer D is able to meet the demand for deposit withdrawals. What is the answer? Correct answer. I'm repeating the questions that a bank is liquid as long as it. A bank is liquid as long as it. The answer A has enough capital to pay off depositors. The answer B has mostly good loans. Answer C does not experience a run on its deposits. Answer D is able to meet the demand for deposit withdrawals. Actually, there are 3 people answered correctly. The answer D is the correct answer. Is able to meet the demand for deposit withdrawals. Then okay, there's another question. What is mean by compliance risk? What is the meaning of compliance risk? Any financial losses or reputation losses created through the non-compliance of any legal or regulatory requirement is called as a financial losses. sorry, the compliance risk. I'm repeating the answer. The compliance risk is called any loss of any financial losses or reputational losses that may be created through non-compliance of any legal act or other regulatory requirement is called as a compliance risk. So if you just give a short answer for this is enough. Okay, that is the compliance risk. You can I think you can refer this to the in my tute also. You can there's other questions which is related to the risk management. It is again you can see that there are again and again questions related to the liquidity risk. So when you are studying that, you are giving more weight to the liquidity risk part. It is asking that liquidity risk management is of the paramount importance as liquidity shortfall of the any deposit taking finance institution can bring all the system wide repercussions. Do you agree? Explain your answer precisely. I am repeating the questions. Liquidity risk management is of paramount importance, or simply says that liquidity risk management is important as any liquidity shortfall of any deposit taking financial institutions can bring all system wide repercussions. Do you agree? Explain your answer. Are you agree or not first? It means the question is simply this. Any deposit shortfall offered in a bank or finance institution will create a system-wide repercussions or system-wide crisis. Do you agree with or not? Yeah, there's an answer. Yes. Yeah, the answer is correct. Or agree, you can write it as a agree, because if there is any shortage in the liquidity risk, it may of a particular bank or finance institution, which may create system-wide risk to the banks and financial institutions. We will see the answers given in the paper. It says that agree, liquidity risk is the inability of the deposit taking finance institution to meet its financial obligations when they come due. So they define that what is liquidity risk. So they are saying that if the banks or finance institution cannot meet its obligations, then it is called liquidity risk. And then it says that deposit taking finance institution might lose liquidity if experience sudden unexpected cash outflow by way of large deposit withdrawals. And if there is any large withdrawals, that may create not only for that particular institution, it will create a risk to the other institution as well through the contagion effect. What do you mean by contagion effect? If any risk or any risk of a particular institution or failure of a particular institution will create a risk to the other institutions also, called as a contagion risk. Then through the contagion risk, it may create a system-wide crisis. That is the answer of the this question. And the second one, they are saying that what does it mean by the bank run? How does the deposit insurance scheme would mitigate the deposit of a bank run? What do you mean by the bank run? It is actually, I haven't teach you. We can, this is a general idea. What do you mean by the bank run? Bank run is a situation where the most of the deposits are withdrawn or depositors withdrawing their deposit simultaneously. For example, if a bank or finance institution which have 100 depositors let's assume which have 100 depositors. Out of the 100 depositors, the most of the depositors, 10 depositors or 20 depositors or 50 depositors, simultaneously ask the money from the banks and financial or withdraw their deposit from the bank and financial institution, which is called as a deposit run. It is says that a bank is situation where a large number of depositors of a bank withdraw their deposit simultaneously due to the concern about the bank solvency. So due to the bank solvency, if the bank depositors simultaneously withdraw their money, it is called as a bank run. And to manage the bank run, in Sri Lanka, we are having deposit insurance scheme. If a bank or finance companies which fail, then this depositors deposit will be compensated through the by the deposit insurance scheme. Currently, what is the limit for deposit insurance scheme? Any idea? Currently, if a bank or finance company fails, what is the amount the depositor can get through this deposit insurance scheme? Recently, also we have cancelled the finance company, the finance, and then the central bank announced that okay, the depositors will get the money through the deposit insurance, but not all amount. That's a limit. What is the limit? It is 600,000. Yeah, there's an answer that it is 600,000. So up to 600,000 per depositors in the per institutions. The people has to vigilant about it. The per deposit and per institutions, they can get the compensation from the deposit insurance money. So that's what, if there is any deposit insurance, the deposit, if there is any bank run, deposit insurance will give to a customer 600 up to 600,000 of their deposits. For example, if a customer A has the 300,000 deposits, the customer B has the 900,000 deposits or 1 million deposits. In that case, customer A receive entire 300,000 as a from the deposit insurance, but customer B will get only 600,000, not 1 million, because the maximum level is 600,000. So for these questions, you have to answer. You have to give the answer. Bank run is a situation where the significant number of depositors withdraw their deposit simultaneously from a bank due to some reasons. It may be it may be the doubt about the solvency of the banks, and then you can explain something about what is deposit insurance. You can say that in Sri Lanka there's a deposit insurance scheme which cater the, if there is any bank run, which will cater the interest of the depositors, and in the instance of bank run, the deposit insurance will pay up to 600,000 as a compensation. So this may be your answer. I think time is closing, and we can just see one more question. It is about the third one is briefly explain the importance of ALCO. It's a deposit taking finance institution. Highlight at least 3 main functions. These questions we have already discussed, I think. ALCO and its functions we have already discussed. And the fourth question, it says that briefly discuss the importance of contingency funding plan in the liquidity risk management. This is we have studied at the class the importance of the contingency funding plan. What do you mean by contingency funding plan? Any short answers? Any banks or finance institution must have the contingency funding plan with the other banks or finance institutions. For example, there's an answer. It's sort of plan B for funding, because to manage the liquidity risk, banks may have the main risk management strategies. First one is having the minimum statutory liquid assets or minimum level of stock of liquidity in form of liquid assets. For example, it may be treasury bill or treasury bill bonds or cash in hand or placement with other banks. This is minimum liquidity. That is one way. The second way is they have to manage the maturity mismatches in a proper way. Okay, they have to see that what is their inflow, what is their outflow, whether their net flow is favorable for them, or whether there is any sources to obtain the funding for the net flow, net shortage of the fund for a particular period. So that is the maturity mismatches. Okay, so they are having the minimum stock, they may have the maturity mismatches, the maturity gap analysis as well. On top of that, they may enter some agreement with the banks, other bank or other financial institution, especially larger bank or larger financial institution. Okay, if there is any urgent need of money, you'll have to give that money at this interest rate up to this amount. This is called contingent funding. For example, the bank X is a very small bank in Sri Lanka. We just call as a bank X is a very small bank. The bank X may have the contingency funding plan with the bank A, which is the largest bank in Sri Lanka. Let's assume. So the bank X may say to the bank A, okay, we will have an agreement. If there is any urgent funding need, I need up to 100 million from you, or up to 500 million you have to provide that. For that, they will charge to give this funding plan. They will give the charges. They will get the charges, and there may be prescribed interest rate, and there may be prescribed limit and the way or the procedures as well. It will be already agreed between the bank X and bank B A. So this is a sort of the plan B. If there is any urgently, they can get that money. That is called the contingent funding plan. So as a one of the liquidity risk management, the bank should have the contingency funding plan arrangement. This is all about that contingency funding plan. So I think we have covered that 4 questions. I think you can answer these 4 questions easily and get that full marks. So this is about the question number 5, and question number 6 also related to the risk management. In the 2019 March paper, I actually there are no compliance risk questions, but related to risk management, there are 2 questions equal to 40 marks. We will see the other one in the next class. Oh, other class will be in this way. Actually, what we can do is I have completed the compliance risk as well as risk management section, compliance function and risk management section. So other class, the next class, I will take you the corporate governance sections, the new sections, or there will be other new lecturer. He will take some other sections of this subject. So I'll check with that other lecturer. If he has the time, he will start his section relevant to his sections, or otherwise I will come and take the corporate governance. So this will be the next class arrangement. If you don't have any questions, I can wind up today's class. See you next class. Thank you.